Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to use a VLOOKUP function to make decisions within a spreadsheet. And I'm going to show you the finished product first, and then I'll walk through the steps and how I developed it. So imagine, if you will, that we have need to maintain an incident report. Okay, so when I was in college I was an RA. Maybe a report like this would have been useful for someone keeping track of the incidents that occurred in a dorm, or if you are a night security person, perhaps keeping track of incidents that occur during your watch is useful. So you can stretch your imagination a little bit and figure out how this could be applied in a variety of situations. But the basic idea is that there are going to be incidents reported, and there will be a timestamp on it, so whatever time the incident occurred, and then some kind of brief description. And that could be more involved, and we could also keep track of the date and provide more information, but I'm trying to keep this example as absolutely simple as possible. Then we're going to pretend that there's some staff person that should be notified when an incident occurs. Okay, so maybe a second tier type person that needs to be notified, and we want to also make note of who that staff person was at the time of the incident and who we called. So rather than having to remember these numbers and actually having to type in the data that you see here in columns C and D, what I want to do is design the spreadsheet so that I use a VLOOKUP table, and my VLOOKUP table begins in cell F18 and extends through cell H22. Okay, so this entire block right here is my lookup table, and my lookup table is arranged with three columns. My first column is a column of indices. The second column is informational, and it's the information that I want to be able to return back to column C. And my third column is informational, and it's the information I want to be able to return back to column D. So the way this works is we have people that are present at certain times of the day. So my column of indices here are going to make note of when the different people happen to be at their post. The staff people happen to be at their post. You'll notice that the index values are arranged in ascending order from top to bottom. That is, the smallest value through the largest value, and that's a requirement of setting up a table. Now, I used a very specific format for these numbers, and I will show you that when I build the spreadsheet here in a moment. But there is a particular time format that I used here, and that time that people are staff people are on duty is going to then correspond with incident times. So the idea is that in order to return Sally, I'm going to put in a function in this case cell C2, and have that function look at the reported time of the incident, and then go to the index column and find the row of best fit. Okay, so Sally with a value of 430 exceeds the first threshold value, but does not exceed the second threshold value. So the best entry point into the table is going to be along row 18. And likewise for, let's take the third entry, for this after hours visitation violation, the time of the incident was 14:09, which would be 2:09 p.m. It maps to the table, meets this threshold, meets this threshold, meets this threshold, does not meet this threshold, so it would map to this row, and at 14:09, Jane is the staff person returned. So again, we're going to put a function in here that is going to look at this cell, and then from this cell's value determine which row it should enter into our lookup table, and at that row it'll be designed, in the case of the lookup function in column C, it'll be designed to return the value at a column displacement of 2, and for column D it'll be designed to return the column the data at a column displacement of 3. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual function. And I've demonstrated this function in class, so this should be review. Alright, so if I look at Jane, for instance, I'm using a VLOOKUP function. The VLOOKUP function has 3 arguments. That is, it has 3 components that are separated by commas in the list within parentheses. And the first argument is going to be the cell that this function looks at or watches or monitors, however you want to say it. And in this case, the cell is going to be cell A4. Cell A4. Okay, so where this function is applied, it's going to look at the value in A4, and then it's going to consult the lookup table that is at the absolute address of F18 through H22, so it would be this address we looked at previously. And once it finds the lookup table, it's going to compare the value that it's watching to the indices, and in this case, where it finds a value of 14:09, it's going to find again that it meets the threshold at 1300, but does not meet the threshold at 1700. So therefore, the entry point is going to be on, it looks like row 19 maybe, and so it will then go over 2 columns, 1, 2, and return Jane. If I look at the VLOOKUP function that's been applied to this cell, it's the same thing. It watches the value in A4. It then goes to the lookup table at the absolute address specified by the second argument. It finds the entry point again at the index value 1300, and this time it goes over 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, and returns that data, which is the telephone number that corresponds with the staff person Jane. So what do you have to do to create the spreadsheet? Well, first off, we're going to have to enter in some data. So I'll put in the column headings, and then I'm going to create the data that you see here. And this is just, some phony data that I made up, where I pretend there's a time of day that the incident occurs, and I give some sort of general description. And then I'm going to have to put functions in this cell and in this cell. And again, I'm going to have to design these functions so that they monitor the data that they pertain to, and that they consult a lookup table and return some of the data, an item of data from the lookup table. All right, so let's take a look at how this was actually created. And I think what I'm going to do to speed things up is I'm going to highlight this text, and after doing that, I'll execute a Control-C to copy onto the clipboard. And let's see, let's escape here. I'll try this a little bit differently. I'm going to actually do these 2 columns because this represents the data that I need to input. So make note that it is column, that row 6 is the last row. That'll be important. So I'm going to do a Control-C, copy that on the clipboard. switch down here in the same spreadsheet and use a different worksheet by clicking on the tab that's labeled Sheet 2. And then I'm going to change the data right here, the format of the data, and so that it displays in 24-hour time. And to do that, I'm going to highlight the cells that need to be formatted for 24-hour time. Go to the home page, and on the number ribbon I have several different formatting options, and from the pull down list I'm going to choose more number formats, and in the dialog box I'm going to choose custom, and from the list I'm going to choose this little obscure selection right here. Okay, so I'll leave that there for a second for you to see it. So I'm choosing the hour and minute option and say OK to that. And now if I go back to cell A1, which was the first cell in the range of cells that I copied in columns A and B on the previous worksheet, and follow that with a Control V, nothing happens. Go back here and try this again. I must have lost what was on the clipboard. So highlight, do a Control C. Sure hope I can do this to save myself some typing. And now follow that with a Control V. There it is. Okay, don't know what happened. I lost something on the clipboard in the process of formatting things. So I'm going to have to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to expand column B a little bit, and in fact expand column A, make that a little wider so it's more viewable. Now I'm going to go back excuse me, I'm going to go back to sheet 1, continue to copy some stuff. So in order to turn off this active highlighting, I'm going to hit the escape key, then just click in an open cell somewhere. And at this point I'm going to copy, too lazy to type, I'm going to copy the values in C1 and D1 with a Control C. Flip back here, Control V, expand the columns a little bit. Okay. Now I'm also going to go back here and copy the data that's in the lookup table. Let me turn this highlight off with an escape. Excuse me. In cell F17 through H17, I have some headings. I'm going to go ahead and copy those. So go down here to F17 and do a Control V, paste that in, expand column widths a little bit. And finally, let's go back over here to the sheet and hit the escape key. And I've got, starting in cell 18, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, count them, 5 cells that I need to apply that same obscure number format to. So again, that begins in cell F18. So I'll go to sheet 2, and in cell F18, highlight down, highlight these cells, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, and go to the format pull down list, choose more number formats, choose custom, and choose the format that we saw before, the hour minute format. Tell it okay. Now that cell is formatted for the values that I want to enter in for my indexes. So the index and the time of day data are going to be compared, so they need to be in the same format. And I'll go back over to sheet 1 and make sure that I Control C after highlighting it, and then come back over here and execute a Control V to paste. and there I have my indices, and then I'll go back here, just finish copying this, so hit the escape key to turn that off, highlight all this data, which was originally data that I typed in anyway, and execute a Control V again, and I'll expand column H. Now it looks to me like I have the spreadsheet set up the way the other one is. I'm going to do just a few little tweaks here, like highlight this, and on the home page I'm going to use left alignment, and I might even, this wasn't on the other spreadsheet, but I'll add a few things, and in this case I'm going to make the data that we're watching bold, and I'm going to also make the data in the cells that act as the index values in the lookup table. I'm going to make those bold too. Now just kind of call your attention to the fact that the data in the columns that have been bolded are the ones that are being compared. Okay, so now I'm ready to begin returning this data from the lookup table, and in order to do that I'm going to need to use a lookup function. So like all functions, I'm going to start with an equal sign, and then the specific function that I'm going to use, and these functions can be typed in upper or lower or mixed case, so I'm just going to leave it in lowercase, and I'm going to use the VLOOKUP function. And as I type that in, you'll notice the IntelliSense kicks in and gives me some information that may be useful if you're not terribly familiar with the function. But in this case, I'm just going to kind of ignore it, and it wants to know essentially what cell should be monitored. So the cell of data that I want to monitor is cell A2, and I'm going to type that in as A2, not putting a $sign in front of the row coordinate, even though I'm going to drag down, because where it's applied to the next cell down, I want it to look at A3, and where it's assigned to the cell below that, I want it to look at A4, and so forth. So I want that row coordinate to change in my first argument. In the second argument, I want to use the data that's in the lookup table, and I could type that in, or I could just simply highlight as I'm accessing the second argument in the function. If I go off and highlight the cells that I want to use, it automatically fills that in for me. Now I need to change that to an absolute address, but I can come back and make an editing change here in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to hit the comma, and it automatically enters in that second argument value for me. And where I'm applying the lookup table data to column C, I want to return the staff person, which would be, starting at the leftmost column in the lookup table, a displacement of 1, 2. So I'm going to put in a value of 2 and close it off, and there's my lookup function, and it's returning Sally, and Sally would be the staff person that I need to contact at 4:30 in the morning, so that's all good. Now what I do want to do is go back in here and change the second argument in the function so that I'm using absolute row values. So I put a $sign in front of the 18. I could put a $sign in front of the F and it would have no effect at all, but that's only necessary if I'm copying across a row and not down a column. So I'll only put in what's absolutely necessary, and that would be the $sign in front of the row coordinates. And now I'm going to click at the end of the function and hit the enter key, and again it has the same result, but when I fill down, it'll allow my row coordinate in my first argument to change. It will lock the row coordinates in the second argument, and it'll keep the numeric value, that integer value 2, constant, because numbers copy in an absolute way. And there we have it, and it seems to make sense. Okay, so if the call comes in at 5:17, it will meet the threshold at 100 hours, but it doesn't meet the threshold at 600 hours at the second row, And so it's going to then find its way into the lookup table through this index and return Sally. And you can look at what it's done in all these other cases and see that it's returning the correct person from the lookup table. Okay, so that was pretty exciting. And now what we need to do is also consult the third column of the lookup table. So I'm going to use this lookup table with two lookup functions. And again, VLOOKUP. Again, I want it to monitor cell A2, and I'll put in a relative address for that cell for the reasons I explained previously. Then I'm going to go ahead and highlight the cells in the lookup table and let the spreadsheet go ahead and fill in those values. Saves me some typing. And this time I want it to access the data in the third column, so the displacement from the leftmost column in the table will be 1, 2, 3, and I put in an integer value of 3 there. Hit the enter key, and it seems to be returning the correct telephone number for Sally. Now, again, as before, I need to change this so that I am using absolute row values. So I'm going to change the way it filled in that second argument by inserting $signs in front of the row coordinates. Click at the end of the function, hit the enter key. It has no effect on the function as it's applied to cell D2, but when I copy it down, it'll allow the first argument's row coordinate to change, but it'll lock the row coordinates on the lookup table because the lookup table is stationary. And when I let go, it returns the rest of the telephone numbers, and you can, inspect the numbers that it's returned and the numbers that are associated with the staff person and see that it's returned the correct values. Okay, so that is pretty much the lookup table, but let's do one other thing. I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm going to have to take a break here in a minute, get something to drink. My throat's starting to get irritated from talking. Excuse me. The last thing I'd like to do, if I can hold it together here, is to put a heading at the top. Now, there's, row 1 has been used. So what I'm going to do is go out to the left margin where the rows are numbered in the spreadsheet, and I'm going to click and then follow that with a right click. Now I am using a computer with a very sensitive mouse. Okay, so there we go. It's actually a touchpad, so sometimes it doesn't recognize a right click very easily. And once I do that, I have a pull down menu to insert. I'm going to insert, and in fact I'm going to go back and do it again. Click again, right click, there you go, and from the pull down menu insert, and insert 2 rows. And you'll notice that when I insert the rows, it automatically adjusts any of the functions to now, for instance, recognize the lookup table 2 rows further down, so don't have to bother about going back in and editing any functions. And what I want to do is put a column heading across here, and I'd like to center it across those columns. Okay, I could go clear to the edge of the screen, but I'm just choosing to put it here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to type the heading in. I'm just going to name this Incident Report. And in this cell, I'm going to use familiar features of Microsoft Office to increase the size of the print and everything. So you can do whatever you want to with that. But now what I want to do to center it across to columns A through H is to click on cell A1 where the value is actually stored, not dragged by the fill handle, but just click on the cell and drag across here. Again, I'm using this touchpad, which isn't always convenient. Let me try that again. Now then, highlight all the cells, and I'm going to use the merge and center tool up here on the toolbar, and there's some variations on this, but I want to use the merge and center option. And when I do, it will take the value that's actually stored in cell A1 and format it, center it across all the columns that I had highlighted. Okay, so that's an example of the VLOOKUP function, and I will return in the next video and do another lookup table and lookup function, and demonstrate a few other functions along the way.